Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali and today I'd like to talk about attachments. And as much as we may all have heard that attachment is the root cause of all suffering, we also cannot deny that we are mammals and social species, and we are interdependent, at least to some extent, on one another. And yes, I would like to stress the difference between being completely dependent and being interdependent. So when it is said that attachment is the root cause of all suffering, it was probably being referred to the notion of us being attached to our ideologies, and we probably becoming a little rigid towards those ideologies. We probably letting those ideas define us rather than we trying to redefine the ideas themselves. But when we talk of attachment as a life form, we will understand that as mammals, or at least as human beings, we are probably the most premature of all the mammalian babies that take birth. We are probably the only species that takes close to 2 years to even start standing on their own feet, to start finding a balance in their own bodies. And in that sense, biologically, we are more dependent on our caretakers, not only to meet our emotional needs, but even for our basic survival. In fact, we probably are one of the only species who are dependent on their caretakers for the longest time possible. As little infants, when we are not even able to sit on our own, we are completely dependent on our caretakers, not only to feed us, but also to keep us warm, not only to look after us, but also to help regulate us when we are in distress, when we are crying, either because of hunger, or either because we are in some kind of a pain, either because we are feeling neglected, or we are cold, or we are too hot, or there is something in our tummy which we are not able to take care of all by ourselves. And it is through this process, through this interaction, we learn whether we can trust on somebody or we cannot. We learn, should we cry out for help, or we learn to suppress our own needs. We learn to be too dependent, or we learn to be interdependent. We learn to either ask for help, or we learn to not ask for help, or even probably reject it at times. And based on studying these interactions, John Bowlby in 1950s had come up with attachment theory. Now we can look at that attachment theory on the internet, but the point is, what they understood, what the researchers have understood, is it is during those initial formative years that lay the foundation of all of our relationships. That is why they probably also say that family is the first school in life. It is also during these initial years that the child's nervous system is developing the fastest that it probably does throughout its lifetime. Not directed intentionally, but quite organically. Through the years, researchers have been able to determine two main kinds of attachment styles. One being the secure attachment and one being the insecure attachment. And funnily enough, secure attachment has no subcategories or no subclasses, while as the insecure attachment has 3 different kinds of subcategories. One being the avoidant, the other being the anxious, and the third being the disorganized. And I think in itself, it reveals a lot about the kinds of attachments we develop in our formative years that kind of becomes our directive for all of our relationships that follow henceforth. For our memories are developed in cumulative modes, both in implicit and in explicit ways, more so in implicit ways, which becomes a bigger part of our subconscious. The learnings through those implicit memories, through those implicit biases, come so naturally to us, come so automatically to us that we don't even think to question it. Metaphorically, they kind of become like a mother tongue, which we use so unthinkably, which is to say that our attachment styles actually become like our mother tongue. Now, since insecure attachments are a whole lot more in number, primarily being the avoidant, the anxious, and the disorganized, subconsciously we also keep attracting each of those in some form or the other. So the anxious one who would get too hyper, who would chase the room around if it did not see its caretaker for a little while, would now start getting attracted to the avoidant or the disorganized kinds, who seem a little more aloof, who seem to them a little more put together. But these are also the ones who who may have a lot of difficulty expressing their own emotions. These are also the ones who may fail to address the negotiables and the non-negotiables in a relationship, for they never learnt how to do that in the first place when the caretaker was not around, and when they knew that they had to suppress their own emotion to self-soothe themselves, or probably they had to learn to brush aside their own big emotions, more so the negative ones, in order to be taken care of by their own caregivers. And essentially, since there are these three kinds of insecure attachment styles, they kind of play the cat and the mouse chase till they become aware of their own attachment styles. Till they start learning to do a different dance, wherein the other partner will then either have to match up to their steps or stop participating in the dance altogether. It might also be helpful to reflect on the saying that the apple never falls far from the tree, which is to say that most of the times, automatically, quite unconsciously, we repeat the same dance of our caretakers. We repeat the same dance that we even had with our own caretakers. Fortunately or unfortunately, since we are not apples, we can learn to have our own dance once we become aware of our own patterns. We can have newer learnings. We can have newer ways of establishing more interdependent, more secure, more connected, more open relationships, wherein we are able to negotiate on our negotiables and non-negotiables, wherein we are able to establish healthy boundaries, wherein we are able to assess our own relationships constantly, wherein we may cut down our own dysfunctionalities onto our other relationships, even onto our next generation. Let's try and become a little more aware about that. Let's try and take quizzes on our own attachment styles. Let's try and work towards developing secure relationship, not only with the self, but also in our interdependent relationships. Let's do that, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contents of my videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.